HIPcast is brought to you by Enterprise Social Record.
Well, today we have from the great state of Missouri, Veronica Richardson. Veronica is probably one of the sharpest minds in the health information space from a compliance standpoint. Veronica, you've had a really interesting career. Your progression and the things that you've done have been really interesting. Today, we're going to talk with you about the False Claims Act. We're going to talk about corporate integrity agreement. While to some folks that doesn't sound interesting, to our group it probably does sound interesting, and it also to our profession it's interesting, but also it's necessary. This is necessary conversation that we're going to have today. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, and I appreciate the invite.
Yeah.
Well, corporate integrity agreement, that sounds like something I have to cover with HR every week. So we tend to have a weekly meeting because I say things that I shouldn't say on calls, but that's okay. So, all right, instead of reading bios, we always ask the question about your journey. So, Veronica, will you share with us about your HI journey and how you ended up in this madness that we call health information?
Yeah, it's been kind of an interesting little ride for me. I happened into healthcare. I just was looking for a job, looking for an office job, ended up at a women's health clinic, working in the medical records, handling their billing. Believe it or not, HIPAA enforcement was actually very new at that time. So I was learning all about the authorizations and how to release records and getting exposure to codes and revenue cycle and stuff. And I had a moment of like, this is actually pretty cool. I need to figure out, is there more to this? And just Googled, is there school for like medical records? Happened to find the health information technology program at my local community college. Thought, okay, I need to do this. Enrolled in that associate's program and loved it. Absolutely loved it. I was like, this is really cool. There's so much more behind the scenes than what I was just doing in this one small clinic. I was like, wow, there's a huge world out there with this. So I finished up that associate's degree, got involved with my local regional association, joined their board. So I finished the degree. I'm in the industry. I start volunteering. Took a little break in my professional career to do the family thing for a little bit, but maintained active involvement in the regional association. Went back to school for my bachelor's degree. Started with the state association Mohima, and I've been actively involved on their board since 2019. So it's just been very interesting there as well. I will say, and I know you guys are huge proponents of volunteering, and you always talk about the value you get out of putting time back into our profession. And I'm a firm believer in that. And I'll tell you that I don't think I would be anywhere near where I am today without those friendships and relationships and networking opportunities that, just being involved in my local and state associations have brought. From those connections, after my bachelor's degree, I became the HIM director at an inpatient psychiatric hospital. So behavioral health is very near and dear to my heart. After leaving there, I joined another large behavioral health organization in their compliance field. They had actually just gone under a corporate integrity agreement and were building out their compliance department. Needed somebody who knew coding and revenue cycle pieces to really be able to meet the obligations of that corporate integrity agreement, build out auditing programs. So that's kind of where I jumped into the compliance side of things. And then from there, was promoted to Vice President of Integrity as that organization continued to grow through mergers, acquisitions, affiliations, partnerships, all the things that are happening in healthcare. And then I decided I needed to continue my education. So I got my master's degree in healthcare administration, and just recently decided to make the career change to leave the provider side of healthcare. And I'm working now as a consultant trying to help other organizations meet their compliance needs and really specializing with behavioral health. So that's my little journey in a nutshell. And it seems like a lot, but at the same time, I also feel like I'm just getting started. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're going to encourage you to continue past the master's because we are bad influences, and we tell everybody, just go ahead and get the doctorate.
Might as well.
So,
Pushers of education over here.
I do
want
have
us
to say
all have a
something, though,
doctorate.
because it was funny when you said you Googled, about the career, and I thought, you know what? I wonder if kids today still Google as a verb, or if they AI as a verb now, and they just have the conversation with AI. So now I'm starting to think, oh man, now I can't say Google or I'm going to show my age.
You just showed your age, buddy.
Well, I mean,
but
I still
Google,
got the encyclopedias back in the day. I remember
even the Google search engine's top response is an AI response now. So
that's true, and I'm slowly shifting away because and we're going to go off the track. We've said AI, we don't have to say AI
right.
anymore. So, but even now, I've shifted away from general search and just go up and hit Ask Gemini and just have the chat with Gemini. So they're slowly moving me away from the platform. But
yeah, it's a wise move. This is definitely a rabbit trail, but it's a wise move for Google to still have the search function as it always is for the people who don't want to change, but then have those additional AI features for the people who want to engage in that way. It's a good move to keep you from going to ChatGPT or something else for your search engine.
And we support Google. They're not a sponsor yet. So if they're listening,
kudos, Google. Kudos.
All sponsorship goes to scholarships in the state of Tennessee, so we appreciate it.
Is their parent company, right? Isn't that true?
Yeah,
let's go.
It's all
hey,
about
Alphabet.
education.
I love it. Well, Veronica, I appreciate so much that you talked about your volunteering and how you started so quickly after school. I love the way you were laying that out because you did talk about that you were serving and volunteering. And sometimes people have a misunderstanding that volunteering or serving is giving of your time for the good of someone else. And that is true. That is part of service, right? But service is enriching for the person that is serving as well. And in this case, as you described, it built friendships and a network of people in our industry that are doing same or similar things, or potentially a different domain than you do. And that way it provides you with a group of experts in something that you're not focused on, so that if you have a need, you can identify someone that can help you through that. So I do appreciate the call out for volunteerism. Super important and enriching. Like, it helps, yes, the profession, and it helps other professionals, and it helps other organizations, but it also does enrich your life significantly, professionally and personally. So I love that you called that out. And I'll probably have a few questions because you're going to teach us a lot of things. I haven't dealt with a corporate integrity agreement. I've never worked in a place that was under a CIA. I've definitely dealt with false claims from the payer side of things. And so let's start just by talking about what is the False Claims Act.
Sure. Back to the basics. The False Claims Act
basics
is an oldie but a goodie, right? So the act itself is over 160 years old. It actually was enacted during the Civil War era to really combat fraud with the federal government from defense contractors. And it's still the main mechanism for the federal government to recover any monies that they expend that they shouldn't have, that were fraudulently requested. It imposes a civil liability on those individuals or companies that knowingly submit claims to the government for reimbursement or for properties that were fraudulent or were false. And that includes any false records, that includes false statements to actually request those monies or the reimbursement. So any false records that are material to a false claim also kind of fall under that provision.
Wow.
And one of the key things about the False Claims Act is you have to have knowledge. It's you're knowingly submitting. Mm-hmm. It's that fraud with intent. And the act actually describes that knowledge in 3 different ways. So you could have actual knowledge of the information that is false, or you could just have deliberate ignorance.
Oh,
I don't
boy.
want to know,
Wow. Wow.
deliberate ignorance of the truth or falsity of the information, or a reckless disregard for the truth or falsity of the information. So that whole what I don't know doesn't kill me
Yeah.
kind of thing. If you're knowingly and deliberately ignoring what's happening within your organization, you could also be found to have submitted a false claim under that knowledge provision.
That's pretty significant. Like
Yeah.
that is, I just think about all the fraud in healthcare alone, just not any other kind of government false claim, but the difference in fraud, waste, and abuse, which, are very distinctly defined. But that deliberate disregard of the information, or what do you call it? Deliberate what?
Ignorance.
Deliberate ignorance.
That was my nickname in college.
Deliberate ignorance. I might start calling you that from now on, Seth. But even that says you're still you're still guilty here, which is, I didn't realize that it said that. That's pretty significant.
Yeah. And it's interesting, Shannan, you talked about the other components of fraud with the government. I mean, yeah, the False Claims Act doesn't just cover medical claims, but healthcare is a very large source of government spending, Medicare and Medicaid, and so those opportunities for fraudulent claims to exist are very significant in healthcare.
Huge.
I didn't realize it was from the Civil War. That's pretty fascinating too.
Yeah, that's so old.
How does that affect, or how is that what the Doge group is using, or are they primarily focused on workflows and fixing the components of things, or are those two things connected with what's going on in the world today?
I don't know the answer.
I'm not sure that I could exactly speak to that, but I do know that under this administration, there is a heightened scrutiny for detection of fraud. And so whether or not that's through Doge trying to figure out what efficiencies are available, I know that this administration is really looking to increase audits, leverage technology to get to the bottom of claims data that may be not clean, and really try to figure out, what spending are they incurring that really shouldn't have happened.
Yeah, I think I saw a thing where, and it might have been RFK that mentioned it, or maybe Dr. Oz, about the number of hospice programs that were in LA County alone, and they just cut them off, and they only got like 2 phone calls from the several hundred of hospice programs, and it's like, wow, that's fascinating. So I assume if they can prosecute those that were falsely claiming care for someone, that they probably are using the False Claims Act as the provision to go set those charges, right?
Yeah, I'm stunned by the fact that it's still the main mechanism for pursuing those dollars. That is shocking to me that it's still the main mechanism. I mean, I understand it, but I am just shocked.
Yeah, I didn't realize
it's still
that. It's
effective.
pretty amazing.
160 years later, it's still effective.
From the Civil War,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that's cool. It's actually kind of cool to think about that.
It is. That was probably some regulations well done, right?
Yeah. Well, it tells you that they all, the defense contractor world also has a major problem with it. It's not just medical care, obviously, if it came from that. So, I did notice in the show notes you had mentioned a word or something that I wanted to touch on. Is it QUETAM? Is that what you said it was pronounced? QUETAM provisions?
It's QUETAM.
QUETAM. I even asked you beforehand, and I got it wrong a second time.
So the QUETAM provisions of the False Claim Act actually allow for individuals to seek a lawsuit against an organization or an entity under the False Claims Act. So it's the whistleblower protections. So if you know of something, you can actually file a suit under QUETAM action as a whistleblower to seek restitution on behalf of the federal government. And then the government has the opportunity to review the case, and they can actually intervene or join the QUETAM action to enforce. So there's an opportunity for those who are exercising that QUETAM provision and filing a lawsuit to get a portion of whatever is recovered. And so if the federal government joins the case, there's typically between 15 to 25% of the recovery goes back to the what is called the relator. That's the person who files the lawsuit. If the government doesn't actually join the case, that individual can continue the lawsuit on their own, and then their portion of the recovery may be higher, so even upwards of 30%. And when you look at some of the enforcement actions that are out there, they're in the millions of dollars. The one that I actually referenced that's kind of started this conversation with you all was $32 million. So you think about 15 to 25% of that coming back to, just an individual that saw something and said something and recognized, things weren't right. So that's an important piece of the False Claims Act. And then also there's the reverse false claim. So Shannan, you mentioned earlier, fraud, waste, and abuse. And when I talked about the False Claims Act, you talk about that intention, that knowing and knowledge of the deception. The reverse false claim is really when you have received money from the government that you shouldn't have, and then you fail to return it. So if you retain that money, if you retain overpayments, you could be in violation of the reverse false claims provision. And that's a really key consideration, because if you fall into that waste category where you just have overutilization of services or abuse, you don't have sufficient documentation for the claims that you're billing, and you have that money paid to you and you keep it when you knew that you should have repaid it, now you're in a situation where you could face that civil liability as well.
Wow, that's interesting. I'm curious, how do you, if you are a facility or a provider who has received healthcare dollars that you shouldn't have had, I mean, what is the process? Is there, you just go to a website and fill out a form? How do you do that? Do you know the answer to that? Sorry to throw one at you. That wasn't scripted.
That's completely fine. So there are actual processes in place for you to be able to submit that repayment back to the payer.
Okay.
And you have 60 days from the time that you identify that you have been overpaid. Oh my goodness, and payers mess up sometimes. They'll pay you a claim twice or something. It's like, oh, this duplicate payment. Once you realize that you weren't due that duplicate payment, you have 60 days to get it returned, to stay within the bounds of the False Claims Act. So there's a lot of different ways that you could repay it. You could write a check back to the payer. You could ask them to void it or recoup it on the next payment that your entity was going to receive. Sometimes, depending on the circumstances of the overpayment or the size of that overpayment, you may be in a situation where you need to disclose, like complete a self-disclosure with that payer. So like your state Medicaid program or something like that. It's kind of explain why you have so many claims that were overpaid, what the circumstances were, how you found that out. But it kind of varies. It depends on payer and what the circumstances behind it are.
Okay. And I'm sure you can find that in your payer policy information, right? So if one particular payer overpaid you, you can call your account rep if nothing else. You'll have a provider rep. So you would be able to call the provider rep if you're in a small single family practice place that got too much money and you're not sure what to do. Just call your provider rep and let them try to walk you through it. Follow it up with an email to recap your discussion so that you have documentation of that outreach. That's always just a
bunch
good
of HI professionals. Make sure it's documented, right? And that's a clarifying point, though. This is not just federal dollars, right? This is the act that can be utilized if it's just, like a commercial payer to a provider, right?
So the False Claims Act was actually for federal money. So it's going to be your Medicare, Medicaid, TRICARE, those federal dollars. A lot of those commercial payer plans obviously don't want you retaining money that you're not due either. So you probably have contractual obligations that you would need to adhere to in returning those monies. But as far as the False Claims Act, it's really about that money from the federal government.
Good. I appreciate that clarification from my perspective.
Yeah, and that's a great question or point too, because all payers that have multiple lines of business, all payers that have, Medicare, Medicaid, and commercial lines of business, they have a different policy or manual for how you and their contacts are all different. Like my provider rep for commercial may be different than the one for Medicare or for the Medicaid or whatever. So you have to find the appropriate policy relative to the line of business, the policy book or the manual relative to the line of business for which you were overpaid. It's not confusing at all.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's move towards the CIA corporate integrity agreement. What are the components of a corporate integrity agreement?
Yeah, so one of the things that the federal government, the OIG, Office of Inspector General, has at their disposal when providers or entities are in violation of the False Claims Act, they can enter into a corporate integrity agreement. And so that settlement agreement where they come out and say, okay, yes, you had a false claim. Yes, we're going to have you pay back $10 million. They can actually also include in that settlement agreement that you go under a corporate integrity agreement. And so this is where the OIG, the federal government, actually says, we're not going to exclude you from the federal healthcare program at this point, but we do want you to understand the seriousness of what has happened with these false claims. And we want to set some expectations, some obligations, and really go into kind of a partnership to bolster the compliance program that you have within your provider agency. And so typically those CIAs are for a period of 5 years, and it comes with a whole host of obligations. So you have to have a compliance officer, you have to implement the compliance program, like the best practice program that the DOJ and the OIG actually stipulate that you have, from training and monitoring and auditing, completing a risk assessment. There's all of these components that go into that. Depending on the type of violation that you had, you probably are going to have a claims review process that has to happen annually as part of the agreement. And so this will be another acronym for you is IRO. It's a claims review by an independent review organization. So that IRO. And that's somebody that the OIG approves, but they're not necessarily working for the federal government. And they're not necessarily working for the provider. They really are to take an objective third-party independent review of the claims and then be able to report back to the OIG, hey, we looked at XYZ providers' claims and things look good, or here are the things that we recognized as an error. And then that provider has to then respond to what those errors were, implement corrective action, repay any overpayments, detail annually in a report to the OIG what they're doing as part of their compliance program, what overpayments they had, the findings of the IRO review, any necessary corrective actions, repayments, all of these things. Basically, you have the OIG walking step in step with you for 5 years, making sure that you're doing the right thing and implementing that best practice compliance program.
That sounds so arduous and daunting and also necessary. So what I hear first in that is a cautionary tale that if you don't have a compliance program, you should go ahead and start one so that you prevent a corporate integrity agreement rather than wait until you're facing a CIA to then implement the compliance program. A couple other things. One, I'm guessing if that IRO, you have to hire that IRO, they don't necessarily work for you, but I'm guessing that the provider has to pay them to do the work.
Yes.
The OIG is not paying them to do the work.
And they don't do it out of the kindness of their heart either.
Yeah. So there's an additional expense there for that. And then I'm curious, one question that I think would be interesting as a health information professional, if I am under a CIA and my, IRO comes in to do that first annual review, are they reviewing just the subject matter based on the reason I'm under the CIA? Are they doing really a full kind of review? What does that review look like?
Yeah, so the stipulations of what that review will entail are actually going to be outlined in that corporate integrity agreement. Typically, it's not just focused on the action or the misconduct that led to the CIA. It's going to be, kind of a general review, making sure things were coded appropriately, making sure reimbursement and claims were submitted correctly, and then also like looking at the documentation itself. So does it support medical necessity? Are all the required components there to justify the reimbursement for the claim? One of the things too that IRO may do, kind of depending on the circumstances and what they're, obliged to do per that agreement, is really take a deep dive into that organization's revenue cycle process.
Yeah.
So really evaluating from the front door registration to payment reconciliation at the end of the cycle, where in that process maybe there are opportunities for improvement or any gaps or risks and things that need to be mitigated.
Yeah, that's you're essentially opening yourself up to a lot more robust review than the one thing that maybe it was only one thing that got you in trouble, but you're looking at a lot more review. So again, I would say avoid a CIA if you possibly can. So as we wrap this up, let's talk a little bit about a use case. You've mentioned the Oglethorpe Inc. settlement. What do we need to know as health information professionals about this case?
Yeah, I'll say what's really interesting about this case is that Oglethorpe was actually under a corporate integrity agreement. They went into a CIA back in January of 2021. So just thinking about it, it's like their 5 years was just almost up. And they actually had a key TAM lawsuit filed because they had not allegedly had not repaid overpayments that were due to inappropriate or unsubstantiated admissions. And so their original settlement was due to, medically unnecessary inpatient psychiatric admissions, kickbacks related to transportation for patients to get them to the facility. And then as they're under this corporate integrity agreement, there's still alleged wrongdoing and resulted in a key TAM action that led to $32 million and actual exclusion. And the big thing here is when there's exclusion from the federal healthcare program, that typical or the minimum is 5 years. And these executives and then the company itself got 10 years of exclusion from the federal healthcare program. That's essentially game over, right?
Wow.
They are not going to be able to participate in reimbursement with Medicare, Medicaid, the VA, TRICARE, any of those federal healthcare programs, grants, all of those things. So one of the things that I think is really important for HI professionals to understand about this case and just compliance and false claims in general is understanding what the requirements are and what policies your organization already has in place to make sure that you're staying on the right side of those regulations. When you see any violations, when you see anything that's suspect, take that to your compliance department. Look and see what the overpayment policy is for your organization. If they have an overpayment policy, or if they don't, maybe it's a recommendation that we get that in place, because this particular case was a failure to return overpayments.
Wow.
And so really understanding kind of what your role is and how it interacts with the grand scheme of the rev cycle and what that could mean for you under the False Claims Act and for your organization.
Yeah, I can only imagine being excluded from federal monetary programs or whatnot. And like you say, it's kind of game over for the organization and probably the individuals from a career perspective. And I'd also be curious if eventually that leads towards criminal indictments, and then they get to go to Club Fed for a little while. And part of me thinks that I would thrive in federal prison, but I don't want to experience it.
Hush.
I
Don't
think
say
I would
that
do
out
well.
loud.
Don't you think I would do good there? I think I would have a
No,
blast.
absolutely
The politics
not.
would be fun.
You'd like to travel the globe way too much to be
Is
at Club
orange your
Fed.
color?
I mean, orange is my color, so
Orange is its color.
I think I could thrive, but
Oh
it
my
would be
gosh.
interesting to see if any of these false claim act type things ultimately led to criminal indictments.
Well, too, we're talking about federal government and federal dollars and federal programs and participation, but once you have those kind of federal sanctions against you, even if a commercial payer is still willing to contract with you on their own, commercial dollars, their leverage in contracting with you gets you the lowest rates possible because you're not they know that you don't have those other lines of business and they know that they would be your sole source. Commercial payers would be your sole source of revenue in the revenue cycle. And then I don't even know if they're permitted through the insurance committee rules to offer the commercial plans if there is a Medicare sanction. It could even be a policy within that payer to say, if you have federal sanctions against you, we won't offer you commercial service either. So we are talking mostly about the federal dollars, but commercial is about 30% of that. It's about 1/3, 30 to 33%, I guess, depending on the market and the state, of what dollars you could be, that you have in your pool of patient mix. So there are also commercial ramifications there as well. It's a fascinating and also pretty scary conversation. That's why you need people like Veronica who know this topic and can help you get out of that mess. Veronica, one thing I wanted to, I was thinking about because you've taken this new role, and I'm curious, does this, I don't know if your employer had a persistent business in the behavioral health space from a compliance perspective. Is this a new opportunity for your organization?
It is.
Awesome.
So very compliance minded, right, with coding
Yep.
and all of the things in HIM, but really being able to kind of specialize that compliance lens in a behavioral health arena is kind of what I'm bringing
That's
to
awesome.
that organization. So yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. Well, this has been a pleasure. And behavioral health is that's a great place for, we do have students that listen to this. It's a great place to look at different opportunities for the HI profession. When I was in college, I made extra money as a sitter in the psych hospital that we had. And those were some fun conversations overnight when I would sit with patients. So had a blast, kind of shaped my future, I think. It's probably, I'm probably a little bit crazy, but it's all right. But Veronica, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining us. We laughed beforehand because I felt like we've known you forever. And apparently this is your first time on. So we're going to have you back on again. So thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure.
All right, Shannan, until next time, my friend.
I'll see you next time, buddy.